Hi, sorry, I just realized there's no sound. So, welcome everyone to tonight's webinar um, on Stop Treating Diseases, Start Building Health. I'm really excited to share this information with you tonight. Um, uh, this last weekend, I went to a workshop for writers and speakers put up in my Hay House, and one of the things that they um, talked about was the way we introduce ourselves. And I was one of the people who volunteered to come and stand up and introduce myself. And I introduced myself the way I usually do as a professional herbalist and iridologist and so forth. And she interrupted me, and then she said, "Okay, so how many of you know what Stephen does?" And uh, uh, nobody, well, very few people raised their hand. I mean, maybe about a third of the people. And so we talked about this, and all of a sudden it hit me what I really do and what I'm really about. And I turned around and I said something to the effect that I'm a natural healer who teaches people how to identify and remove the root causes of their health problems rather than just treat the symptoms. And the minute I said that, it just I felt this power in it, and it really has to do with my personal journey because um, we uh, when I got started because of my own health problems, and when I first started trying to use herbs, I was using them in a model of trying to treat diseases, and while I did get some benefits from them, I didn't really get the kind of consistency I was looking for until I had a understanding that changed my paradigm, that changed the entire way I think about health and disease. And so what I'm going to do tonight is endeavor to make that transition for you, and not just the initial transition that I made, but the 35 years since I made that shift in understanding of how powerful that idea is. And it relates to this topic of working on the cause of disease rather than treating the symptoms. And see, and so a way to start understanding this is when someone asks, "How do you treat this particular, disease?" Okay, the reason why they ask that question is because most people are thinking of health as an absence of disease. But it's really the reverse. Disease is an absence of health. Now, that's important to understand because you don't cure darkness. You don't treat darkness. The only thing that fixes darkness is to build up, bring in the light. And so basically, if you look at that way, the only way to cure disease is to rebuild health. In other words, it's not about the disease, it's about health. And one of the things I really believe is that health is basically a function of energy, the level of vitality in the body. It's a state of vibrant energy. And all disease is a diminishing of this vital energy. And of course, if when we completely lose that energy, it results in death. And that's why energy was a really big concept in all traditional systems of healing. They gave it different names. The Chinese called it qi. The Ayurveda called it prana. Native Americans just referred to it as spirit, although some Western people do. The traditional Western medicine called it the vital force. Um, the problem with modern medicine is we don't believe that there's a ghost in the machine in modern medicine anymore. We don't believe there's a spirit. We don't believe that there's an energy. Everything is purely structural and biochemical, not energetic. And so that's why the whole system is geared towards using drugs and surgery to either manipulate the chemistry or manipulate the structure. But when you think about that, there's something wrong with that model, fundamentally wrong with that model. Because think back to when you were a little kid. At one time you were an infant and you became a child, and you were a little child. You were much smaller than you are now, and then you became a teenager. and a young adult, and I don't know what age you are at this point, but if you look back over your life, you'll realize that, your body is very different now than it was then, and yet you are still you. And what's really interesting is that the evidence is that the body completely remakes itself every 7 years. Some cells are basically dying and being reproducing and being restructured, more like every 3 or 4 days. But there are other cells that last for a lot longer. But basically, there are people who say that there's really not one speck of matter in your body today that was there 7 years ago. So how can life be materialistic? How can life be something that is just physical and biochemical? Because if I was physical and biochemical, how come I can remember things that happened more than 7 years ago? Even though there's no material left from who I was 7 years ago. So I am one of the people who believe, there is something beyond that. But really, what I've learned is that restoring health is actually what I call treatment by prevention. In other words, for years, I've been trying to figure out how to build health. And building health is the same whether you're trying to maintain your health or whether you're trying to regain your health. It's the same thing. In fact, for years, I resisted writing a book like my my two books, the Comprehensive Guide to Nature Sunshine Products and my Modern Herbal Medicine book, that list a whole bunch of diseases and link them to different products and supplements and everything, because I don't think that way. I haven't thought that way at all. But I actually, when I produced these books, what I tried to do was actually go in and talk about how to figure out what the root causes are and select remedies based on that. But the fact of the matter is that I really don't know how to, treat any disease because I don't work that way. I actually look at health. In fact, I really don't need to know what a medical diagnosis a person has to help them on this process. And in fact, a lot of disease names are nothing more than names for patterns of symptoms. So an example of that is the word arthritis. Which happens to be the theme of my member program this month. I'm doing some webinars on this next week. Arthro is Latin for joint. Itis is inflammation. It means inflammation is heat, swelling, redness, and pain. So if you wake up in the morning and your joints are swollen and they're painful and they're red and so forth, and you go to the doctor and he says you have arthritis, you told him your symptoms in English and he tells your symptoms back in Latin, and you know nothing more than you knew in the first place. That's why, one of my favorite herbalists, Samuel Thompson, said the knowledge of the name, in other words, knowing the name of a disease, is cumin and anise. It's not insignificant. Understanding the origin of malady, understanding what is causing the body to be sick, is what really makes the difference. In fact, part of the thing in Thompson's book was, why do you talk about diseases in Latin anyway, except maybe to confuse people. But it goes beyond that. I mean, basically, you have, your throat gets swollen or whatever, and you may have laryngitis. Your bronchioles get swollen and inflamed, and you have bronchitis. Your appendix gets inflamed, and you get appendicitis, and so forth. But today it gets worse because a lot of disease names are actually invented by marketing companies to help sell drugs. So shyness becomes social anxiety disorder, and heartburn becomes gastroesophageal reflux disorder, and restless children now have attention deficit hyperactive disorder. And some of them are even more elaborate just to become more PC. But really, when you give a name to a disease, you really have very little useful information about how to go to help someone be healthy. It's a very, very difficult thing for me when someone tells me a particular condition of the body and expects me to treat it allopathically. And I'm going to show you why. Um, um, this is a quote from John Scudder, specific diagnosis. He says that disease has reference to the this classification of illnesses according to what's called nosology, or the naming of diseases. In this book written by Scudder, he basically says that that is totally worthless information, because it really doesn't give you it's therapeutically inaccurate. He says the doctors travail in diagnosis until they can come up with the right name for the disease, and then then they consult their book for a recipe to throw out a name. And that's what most people, because that's the way medicine does it. That's the way most natural health practitioners do it. Is they want to throw the throw the recipe at a name. And he goes on to say that the student would think that that was really important, to get the name for the disease and call that diagnosis. And what could be more natural than to build treatments around the names? But that's what I think of as cookbook medicine or cookbook healing. It really doesn't get at what's going on. I mean, honestly, if you come to me and tell me you have anxiety or depression, or you're overweight, or you have high blood pressure, and say, what do you do about it? I have no idea. And part of the reason I have no idea is because every single one of the things on this list has multiple different things that can be causes and contributing factors. So unless I know information about you and what's going on with your diet and your lifestyle and everything, I really have no way of knowing what to do. I need a heck of a lot more information than just some name that's been given to your symptoms. In fact, disease really isn't a separate thing from you. It is a manifestation of your life energy, and I'm going to really explain what that means. It's not something that you need to expel from the body. It's something that is telling you something about what's going on in your body that you need to work with. So symptoms, although they're annoying, are the results of a diminished health and vitality. And they're not the cause of diminished health and vitality. Now that, again, sounds, it's a very simple idea, but when you give a disease name, you're talking about a result. And you never fix anything by trying to fix a result. The only way to fix it is to go back and figure out what was the cause. Okay? And therefore, we have to go beyond the nomenclature of disease names to get to this. So here's the problem, and I'm going to really explain this tonight. If you use any medication, and it doesn't matter if it's an herb or a vitamin or a supplement or a drug, okay, to try to fix a symptom, okay, it's like trying to fix your car by short-circuiting the car's sensors. In other words, the gauge comes on and tells you the engine is overheating. The gauge comes on and tells you that you're low on oil or that you're low on gas. And so the way you're trying to fix that is by cutting the wire or disengaging the gauge so that it doesn't blink at you anymore. And while none of us would ever think of doing that with our car, we want to do it with our body all the time. We have this symptom and we want to make the symptom go away. But the symptom, as I'm going to explain, is actually a warning signal that's trying to alert us to something. And unless we figure out what that something is and fix it, we're just turning off the signal. So to really get and make this clear, the body is constantly giving us feedback about how we're taking care of it. So we get uncomfortable sensations all the time that we understand exactly what they mean, and we do something about it. We get hungry, we know we need to eat. We get thirsty, we know we need to drink something. We get tired, we know we need to rest. We feel restless, we want to get up and move, we want to do something, we want to get active. These sensations that the body is giving us are messages telling us what our body needs in order to be healthy at any given moment. So when you have a symptom that's one of these messages, you can't cure it by blocking the message or the symptom. You can't fix thirst by eating. You can't fix restlessness by sleeping. You have to give the body the appropriate thing that the body is looking for that is in relationship to the signal. So if the body is short on water, the only remedy that will fix the body is water. There's no shortcut. There's no circumventing the body's needs. You can't take a drug or an herb or a supplement and get rid of something that is a sign that the body isn't getting things that it needs. So I'm going to use the example of caffeine because this is a natural substance. Coffee and other caffeine-bearing herbs are basically herbal medicines. All right? So we're not talking about drugs here. We're talking about a constituent found in plants, very similar to what you'd find in different constituents in other medicinal plants. So when people are tired, they will often drink coffee, thinking it's giving them energy. But that's not how it works. Okay, what's really working here is caffeine binds to a neuroreceptor in your brain for a neurotransmitter called adenosine. And adenosine is the neurotransmitter, the messenger, the little signal light that comes up in your body computer dashboard and says, it's time to rest. You need to rest. It's like that warning light, that warning gauge on the car saying your engine's overheating or you're getting low on gas, right? But as caffeine binds to that receptor site, it blocks the message that you're tired. It doesn't give you energy at all. It merely blocks the message that you're tired. That's all it's doing. Now, what the body does is the body goes, we need rest. And since you're blocking the message that you need rest, we're going to get around this. So after about 10 days, it builds enough neuroreceptors to bypass the caffeine you're taking. And from then on, you actually have to take the caffeine to keep from feeling tired because you have too many receptors for adenosine. And you need then more caffeine to override the body again. Okay? In other words, caffeine cannot take the place of sleep. It can only temporarily block the message so that you can stay alert, which I think is fine if you're, having to drive late at night and you've got to stay awake for some reason and you're doing this once in a while to do this. But if you're doing this all the time with anything in your body, obviously it's going to throw your system out of balance. So, we talked about those basic symptoms, but a lot of the symptoms that we have are just the same kind of thing. They're messages telling us that either that we've done something that just harmed our body, something that didn't agree with our system. The difficulty is that because we've been trained that a lot of these things are just happening to us, that there's no real cause for it, we don't take the time to pay attention enough to realize that this is happening. For example, we eat some stuff and our stomach gets upset and we go, oh, I got indigestion, blah, blah, blah. And we're not making the connection that the reason our stomach is upset is because of what we just ate. And we should, and our body's telling us that isn't good for me. That's irritating me. Don't feed me that. But we don't want to listen. Just like we don't want to listen to the fact we're tired, so we take caffeine. So we want to take some kind of remedy that's going to settle our stomach and fix that without us having to change our behavior. Okay, headaches are another good example. One of the most common causes of headaches. There's a lot of causes of headaches, but one of the common causes of headaches is dehydration, not drinking enough water. Drinking more water and headaches often go away. But headaches could also be caused just because, again, you're tired and your muscles are getting tired. Or they can be caused because you've got a food allergy or a food sensitivity. That's something you're eating. Well, this is very true for a lot of migraines. Um, feeling brain fog, feeling moody, feeling irritable. The body is constantly trying to talk to us and tell us that things we're doing are distressing it. And it gives us little subtle messages at first, little minor aches and pains, little annoyances, little bad feelings, but we don't want to pay attention. So we ignore it, and then it gets worse and it gets worse, and the warning light comes on and blinks stronger and stronger and stronger, and we keep going, oh, now I want to take something to turn off the warning light. So pain, like I said, headaches. Pain is communicating that something is wrong, and headaches can be signs of a lot of different things. So if I take a painkiller for my headache, I'm doing the same thing I'm doing with caffeine. I'm merely blocking the signal that's telling me something's wrong, and then I'm thinking, oh, I'm curing my headache. No, because tomorrow you get another headache. Until you quit doing the thing that's causing the headaches, you're just going to have to keep taking painkillers to block the message. It's like you're going to have to, until you get the sleep you need, you're going to keep taking caffeine to block it. Again, not that symptomatic relief can't be helpful, sometimes. I mean, certainly none of us like pain, but when we're using symptomatic relief as a replacement for going to figure out what's really wrong, okay, that just doesn't cut it. There's something seriously wrong with that. Now, this is the discovery I made that really changed me around when I realized that many disease symptoms are actually generated by the body's immune system. They are not diseases at all. They are actually the body curing itself of disease. And this includes almost all of the symptoms of acute illness. When you get food poisoning, the nausea and vomiting that occur after that are not a disease. They are the body trying to cure itself by throwing off the tainted food that you just ate. Well, when you get stuff into your system that is irritating the body starts to wants to get rid of it. It wants to throw it off. And it's the job of your immune system to kick stuff out of your system, which it will do by creating nausea, vomiting, by creating diarrhea, by making your sinuses run, or coughing up mucus from your lungs, or your skin erupting in a rash, or sweating, or a fever. Every single one of the things that I just mentioned is not a disease. A fever is not a disease. A cough is not a disease. A cough is the body trying to cure a disease. A fever is the body trying to cure a disease. So the first big switch that I made was I started trying to figure out how to help the body do what it was trying to do, which is get rid of the irritants. And I started to get these amazing results with acute illness. And I raised my kids this way. In fact, a prime example of this, one night my stepson in second marriage woke up with a fever in the middle of the night, complaining his tummy hurt. And I had some lobelia, which is an emetic that can induce vomiting and is also a very strong relaxant. And I had a little bit of a children's herbal laxative formula. And I said to myself, I'm going to get this out one way or the other. So I started giving him a little of both of these and making him drink water and giving him a little, and he kept saying his stomach hurt. I said, let yourself throw up, you know? So finally he let himself throw up. He felt a little better for a few minutes, and then he started to oh, my hurts. And he was holding his hands down lower. So I kept it up, and about 10 minutes, 15 minutes later, he suddenly had the urge to go to the bathroom. He had a huge bowel movement. Fever came down. He didn't feel bad. He went back to sleep. And when he woke up, he was perfectly well. I've seen this happen over and over and over and over again. If you support instead of trying to stop the diarrhea, bring down the fever, suppress the cough, dry up the runny nose, if you take herbs and remedies and water and things that help to support what the body's trying to do instead of fighting against what the body's trying to do, I've seen kids get completely well in as little as 2 hours. I've never had a cold that's lasted more than a day since I learned to do this, because if I start to come down with something, if I just take the time to just do some things to let my system clear itself out, it's gone. It's so and it's such a hard thing, because people will take something and they'll go, oh, my skin broke out in a rash, did this make me ill? That the rash is not an illness. The rash is your body throwing off something that's irritating it. Okay? And what you want to do is find out ways to help get that out of your system. But that's not the only thing symptoms are. Symptoms can also be, this is where the transition made, and I started to get into understanding what was going on in chronic illness. So in acute illness, just to kind of make this clear, in acute illness, symptoms are either the body telling us it needs something, or the body trying to get rid of something that we just did to irritate it, or communicating that we just did something to irritate it. In chronic illness, a lot of symptoms are coping mechanisms for the former things. They're coping mechanisms with the fact that the body isn't getting what it needs, or they're coping mechanisms with the fact that the body is constantly being bombarded with irritants that we're not recognizing that those things are irritating our system, and that it basically has lost the ability, lost the vital power, lost the vital energy to be able to try to throw this stuff off. And so there's a lack of nutrients needed to sustain health, a presence of toxins and nutrients, and a third factor, which is a really critical one, which is ongoing mental and emotional stress that's not being dealt with in a constructive manner. In other words, there is a lack of self-care. And I'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. So what I'm trying to communicate here is that the biggest lesson I ever learned in natural healing was symptoms aren't the enemy. Symptoms aren't the problem. And since most diseases are just names for symptoms, or groups of systems, or symptoms, or clusters of symptoms, diseases are not the enemy. Okay? And what I came to realize is that symptoms are actually our allies. Symptoms are our friends. They may be extremely uncomfortable, but the reason why they're uncomfortable is because the body is slamming you to get your attention, to tell you to stop doing the things that you're doing that are harming it, and start taking care of it. So this is the paradigm shift, the understanding that after 35 years of working with illness in this frame of mind, okay, I've seen that this works and works consistently in helping people get health. So as I've already talked about this are some quotes about how, that a lot of these diseases are just the body trying to eliminate its matter. And I actually came up with the phrase, the reason why modern medicine will never discover a cure for the common cold is because they're trying to suppress the symptoms. and the symptoms are the cure. The cold is the cure. So when I stopped fighting the symptoms and started supporting them, like I said, over cold in a few hours. Easy peasy, because I'm helping the body heal rather than fighting what the body is trying to do to heal. So basically, summary, what are diseases? Diseases are generally names for collections of symptoms. And those symptoms are telling us one of four things. They're either messages or they're coping mechanisms. As messages, they're telling us that we lack something that we need to sustain our health, or we are doing or have done something that wasn't good for our health. Or as compensating mechanisms, they are either trying to expel something that is damaging or irritating the body, or trying to compensate for a lack of something that's needed to sustain health, or the presence of something that is harmful to health. That's it. How can that be something that you have to fight or something that you have to correct? The job of the natural healer isn't to treat the diseases. It's to figure out what is lacking that is necessary to sustain health and what is present that is interfering with health. And that's it. And the symptoms can be great clues to that. In other words, the diseases can be clues that guide us to the process of discovery, but you can't treat the symptoms, i.e. the disease, directly because it actually won't get you well. Symptomatic relief isn't healing, okay? But it's not healing even if you're doing it with herbs and supplements. It's not about the substances you're using, the methods you're using, so much as it is your approach, whether you're approaching attacking the disease or whether you're approaching trying to rebuild health. You have to make the paradigm shift from the one to the other before you'll start to get really, really good results. The bottom line is this. Whenever I hear they talking about the healthcare system in America, I just cringe because we don't have a healthcare system. We have a disease care system. We take care of diseases. If we had a healthcare system, my gym membership would be tax deductible. My nutritional supplements would be tax deductible. The things that I do to get my regular massages would be tax deductible. I would have incentives, economic incentives, to do things to take care of my body. Instead, right now, forgive my little political rant here, I'm being penalized by being charged extra taxes because I don't have health insurance, because I hardly ever use medical doctors anyway, and the cost of health insurance would be such that I would not be able to afford my regular massages, my regular chiropractic visits, all the supplements I take, my gym membership, and the other things I do to try to stay healthy. I'd rather invest my money in trying to stay healthy than invest my money in doing that. And in having, and not that I don't realize there's a catastrophic thing, but when I did have a thing some years back to do illness, the total sum thing of the thing I had to go to the doctors wouldn't have equaled the deductible, high deductible on the health insurance policy I could have gotten. So what I'm talking about here is what I call alternative allopathy. People want to switch to natural remedies, but they're still thinking in terms of getting rid of the symptoms. Okay? And here's the key. The medicines that are best at getting rid of the symptoms are also the ones that will ruin your health. Why? Because they're shutting off the warning lights. They're turning off the indicator lights. They're allowing you to go on and continue to ignore the well-being of your body and push yourself harder, just like taking painkillers for the headaches or caffeine for the fatigue. You are basically, ignoring the real problem, band-aiding it over, and it gets worse and worse and worse until you wind up with some catastrophic illness. Okay? So, natural healing is not about fighting disease. It's about building health. And this is become what I've decided is my core message. From this point forward, I'm going to build my entire company on this message because I want to get this message out here. I want to start educating people of the difference between disease care and health care. Because it's time we start investing our money, our time, and effort in healthcare instead of investing so much of our money into time and health and disease care. So bottom line again is this is an incomplete model. You give me the name of a disease and expect me to come up with a remedy. I don't have enough information to do that because the best I can do is give you symptomatic relief. And I'll tell you what, herbs and natural remedies aren't as good at giving symptomatic relief as drugs are. So if you want symptomatic relief, go the pharmaceutical route because you'll get better results. Your health will decline faster, but so forth. So that's, again, like my personal vision is to see this message get out in the world. That's why I mentioned about sharing this, and this is going to be posted online, and it's going to be eventually posted on YouTube because I really want to help get this understanding out to people. Healing is about making whole, and it comes from the same Latin roots as holy, and health comes from the same Latin roots as the words whole and holy. And so anything we're doing is restoring wholeness, restoring integrity to the system. On the physical level, that's restoring integrity to the physical body, which means giving the body what it's asking for that it needs and stop doing the things that the body is telling you it's irritating them. But there's also the point of internal alignment of your thoughts, your feelings, and your actions. And when you are not in internal alignment, when you're not whole, when you're thinking one thing and feeling another thing and doing another thing, you have internal discord, and that alone will lead to illness. But a lot of that mental and emotional stress comes from our relationships, comes from what's going on in the world. Healing means also restoring oneness and unity to marriages, to families, to communities, to our nations, to our relationship with nature, and to our relationship with God, to come back to oneness and wholeness. This is the thing I've been working on, and I believe in healing on a much bigger level than just the physical body or even the body, mind, and spirit. I believe healing has to involve learning how to get along better with each other, learning how to live more in harmony with nature, and regaining our connection to the divine. So this is the model that I use of health and disease. Basically, what it says is we have a constitution, we have a genetic inheritance that has certain inherent strengths and weaknesses. Some people are inherently, better equipped to handle certain stresses and toxins and so forth than other people are. For example, there's a genetic defect that's involved in Alzheimer's. But that genetic defect is involved in a lessened ability to detoxify byproducts of aluminum damage in the brain. So there's a genetic component, but there's also an environmental component. The increasing amount of aluminum that is which is dissolved by acid. So as you get more acid-forming substances with acid rain and acid in the water and acid foods and so forth, and you have aluminum that goes with that. If you have a genetic difficulty with detoxifying aluminum, you can get Alzheimer's. There's a very good article about that in one of the wellness journals predisposed to. But that's basically the way it is. The reason why everybody who's exposed to a particular environmental toxin or irritant doesn't get sick from it is because some people have a better genetic ability to cope with it. So it's a combination of your unique genetics, which are unique to you, and what your environmental influences are. So some people need more of certain nutrients because their genetics have difficulty with things. Like there's a disorder where people flush B6 and zinc out of their body too quickly, and that can lead to certain mental and emotional issues. So supplementing with extra B6 and zinc helps to counterbalance that. This is how this works. But you can't, knowing the Constitution is understanding about the person you're working with, and the environment is understanding, how much sleep are they getting, what are they eating, how often do they exercise, understanding about their diet, lifestyle, and what's going on in their life. And until you take a look at the person and you take a look at what's going on in their life, you don't have the information to understand why they're getting sick. And if you don't understand why they're getting sick, how can you come up with a remedy? All you're going to do again is placate symptoms. So first you have to know who has the disease. What is this person like? What's their body build? What, maybe a little bit of family history. I happen to use iridology and also body typing, just looking at a person's body and shape and so forth to understand a lot about their constitution and their genetics. And then I take a case history when I'm working with a client, so I understand what's the environment that's giving rise to the disease. Is this person, I've seen people who they were ill primarily because they were in a really, really destructive, abusive relationship. And by actually helping them get out of that abusive relationship, they got well. Independent of the supplements or herbs or other things. You see? You can't fix the problem unless you understand what is causing the distress. And this is why we need a critical paradigm shift in the way we think about things. Finding the cause leads naturally to the remedy. In other words, I think of myself when I'm working one-on-one with a client that I'm a detective. I'm a health Sherlock Holmes who's sitting there trying to figure out who done it. But once I figure out who done it, then I know what to do to help the person regain their health. So this quote from Samuel Thompson, "Let names of all disorders be like to the limbs joined onto the tree. Work on the root and that subdue, and all the limbs will bow to you. The limbs are colic, pleurisy, worms, and gravel, gout, and stone. Remove the cause, and they are gone." When I read that, that's when I got this paradigm shift that led me to create this disease tree, which actually was created in 1980, 35 years ago. Although this particular illustration that I did was copyrighted in 2003. But basically, it shows this picture that I created, and that was filled in a little bit with some help from some of my friends, Kimberly Ballas and others, to basically create a mental picture to illustrate this. Up at the top, you have all of your different ailments, okay? And when you're treating symptoms, when you're treating the ailment, you're treating the disease, when you're throwing remedy, prescribing it names, like Scudder talked about, prescribing it names, and I see people on the internet doing this all the time. Someone posts, "I've got this disease," and people start throwing remedies at the name. They don't know anything about the person. They don't know anything about the person's lifestyle. They don't know anything about the person's diet. They don't know anything about what's going on, but they're ready to start throwing remedies at the name. Okay? All you're doing is hack at the branches. You'll never really get well. That's what I was doing before I figured this out. I was using natural remedies and hacking at the branches, and sometimes I seemed to help, and sometimes it didn't. But oh well. But once I figured this out, I started to be able to figure out what was really causing the problem, and then I started to figure out how to actually solve it. But the four root causes of illness are unresolved mental and emotional stress, nutritional deficiencies, physical injuries, and toxins or irritants, things that are irritating the body. And that upsets what's called the biological terrain, which upsets the body systems, which gives rise to disease. And the constitutional part of this model is the soil. So basically, these are the environmental factors that give rise to disease. This is the person, the constitution. And from that arises the problem of the disease. And then, but you have to work on the root. You have to subdue the root. You have to figure out what's going on with the person's mental and emotional stresses. You know, what nutrients are they deficient in, and how do we get those nutrients into their body? What, injuries they have. Now, this is where medicine is really good. Medicine is fantastic at trauma medicine, first aid. Superior in every respect, but you have to treat injuries. You have to help the body heal from injuries. And then toxins. You have to help the body have what it needs to detoxify from toxins it's exposed to, but you also want to minimize your exposure to toxins. So basically, this means we're looking at things like emotional abuse, negative thoughts, buried emotions as being root causes of illness. We're also looking at poor diet, dehydration, not giving the body what it needs. We're looking at toxic overload, poor eliminative function, and exposure to environmental toxins, and physical trauma, which can include exposure, injury, sleep deprivation, lack of exercise, and poor posture, which puts structural stress on the body. These are all things through my study. These are the things that we need to work on. So what we need to do is look at where on this list are we having problems, because that's where our diseases are arising from. And then we fix these things, and it starts fixing our diseases. And the body doesn't heal selectively. As your vitality and energy come up because you're starting to give the body what it needs and deal with the things that are stressing it, your body then comes up and starts trying to heal everything. As your vitality starts rising and your health energy starts rising, your level of life and light starts rising. So the ABCs of actual healing are to activate, build, and cleanse, which is related to those root causes. Activate, heal the unresolved emotional stress and trauma. Activate the healing energy, get your thoughts and emotions in a positive vein. Build, get the right nutrients into the body, and C, cleanse. This is the stuff I've been teaching for years. None of this has anything to do with the disease. Doesn't matter what disease you have, you need to do this. To heal. Not to relieve symptoms, but to heal, you've got to do this. You've got to look at these three things. This is the stuff I look at constantly in my life. How am I eating? Am I being exposed to things that are irritating my body? What are the emotional stresses and stuff I'm working on? The system is the ABC+D, and I haven't taught this for years, but when I first learned this from Ed Millett, there was actually an E in there, and I decided to throw it in there because basically E is the emergency aid. It's the first aid for physical trauma. Render appropriate first aid or trauma care for injuries. Okay, but the plus D is to balance the biological terrain and support the weakened body systems, which is part of the disease tree model. So now I'm going to just briefly overview some of these things this evening, but I just want to mention, this is an overview. I have a number of resources that you can, refer to if you want to learn more. There's a little booklet I just wrote that basically explains what I just explained about working on root causes rather than treating symptoms, called Stop Treating Disease, Start Building Health. It's really short and whatever. And if you're a practitioner, I wrote it with the idea of something to give to clients to start changing their paradigm. So if you want to buy multiple copies to give out to clients, you can get a really good discounted price. But I have my 2 books, Modern Medicine and the Comprehensive Guide to Nature's Sunshine Products, um, which basically list diseases and try to help you, point you to a direction of looking at underlying causes. And then the 7 Keys to Effective Natural Healing course is a little course I put together that goes into depth about all of this. But for tonight, let's just talk briefly about these things and just kind of give you a little bit more detail about what it really means to be building health instead of treating disease. I believe that the single most important factor in healing is belief. If a person does not believe that they deserve to be happy, that they deserve to be healthy, and that they can heal, you'll never get them well. Ever. Really, in order to be healthy, you have to love yourself. You have to care about yourself and your needs. At this workshop, one of the presenters talked about a book, Cheryl, her last name slipped my mind right now, but she wrote a book called Extreme Self-Care. And it's the idea that we need to take care of ourselves. We need to love ourselves. We need to do things to care for ourselves, because a lot of things that are going on with us both physically and emotionally are really due to the fact that we're not taking care of our needs. We're not recognizing our needs or taking care of them. We activate the healing energy of the body. We activate the vital force of the body by identifying and releasing the attitudes and emotions that are holding us back from taking care of ourselves. And I can't tell you how many times that has worked for me. When I've been having a health problem and I've figured out what it is that I'm not taking care of myself. And when I start taking care of myself, the health problem immediately goes away. So it begins with activate, which is something that I think is ironic, because most people I see in this industry are always like trying to recommend supplements. It's herbs or vitamins, minerals or essential oils or da da da. That's their first thing that they go to. But really, the first thing we need to go to is to understand, does this person really believe that they deserve to be healthy, that they deserve to be happy? Do they? Because they won't make any changes if they don't do this. Emotions are the currency of life, okay? They're just like cash facilitates the exchange of goods and services. Emotions are what move the body, what motivate us to do things. Okay? We are primarily motivated by our emotions. We want to be happy. Oh, Cheryl Richardson. That's right. Thank you. Someone said that. Wrote the book Extreme Self-Care. Anyway, so we're usually trying to feel good, but when we dam up our emotional energy by suppressing our emotions, by not paying attention to what our feelings are trying to communicate to us our needs. So when we're suppressing our feelings, when we're saying, I shouldn't feel angry, and I shouldn't feel sad, and I shouldn't feel this, and I shouldn't feel that, and I shouldn't feel this other, we're really saying, I shouldn't have these needs. These needs aren't real. I don't need to meet these needs, or I can avoid these needs. I can tough it out and deprive myself. But you can't. It'll eventually make you sick. And so trying to block those emotions, for starters, will cause you to tense your muscles and not breathe properly. So that's one of the big reasons why I teach, a big part of what I teach is emotional healing and talking about so forth. We won't take care of ourselves if we don't start learning to like ourselves, love ourselves. Addictions, junk food, and many of the things that we are doing that are harmful to our bodies, we're doing not because we're really looking for pleasure, but because we're really numbing ourselves to our pain. alcohol and a lot of these things that people do. A person becomes an alcoholic not because the alcohol makes them feel good, because it certainly brings a lot of pain and suffering and whatever into their life, but it numbs them from having to deal with their pain. We do the same thing with junk food. Eating a lot of sugar, eating a lot of candy, a lot of chocolate, drinking a lot of these things. It basically numbs you to your pain. It doesn't make you feel good. The good feeling you get from it is only the temporarily blotting out of the pain. And so until you get in to start dealing with those things, you can't really heal. Now, the thoughts plus our emotions are a creative tool in the universe. If you read a lot of the literature coming out and looking at this, a lot of experts in this field teach something I firmly believe in, that wherever we focus our mind and our emotions, we are generating and creating more of that in our life. So I look at all the Facebook posts and I look at all the people who are against this and against that and against that and fighting this and fighting that, and all that energy of fight, 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 condemn, judge, complain, blah, 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 creates more of the very thing that we don't want. And that's also true of health. Focusing on the disease, focusing on, I got to get rid of this disease, I got to fight this disease, I got to do this with this disease, is actually making us sicker. That's why you have to shift from thinking about disease to thinking about health. How do I take care of myself? Positive thoughts are constructive thoughts. They are motivated towards not what I'm against, but what I'm for, what I'm trying to create. Negative thoughts are focused on what I don't want, what I'm fighting against, what I don't want. And that perpetuates what I'm fighting against. And that's true both socially and internally with myself and my own health. So this is a little thing I've used a number of things. Positive is thinking about what you want. Negative is thinking about what you don't want. Do you want to be healthy, or do you want to focus on health, or do you want to focus on disease? Thinking about problems versus thinking about solutions. Trying to avoid stress instead of making time for self-care and pleasure. We're trying to anticipate the future, worrying versus focusing on what I should be doing right now. Thinking about what I don't have versus being grateful for what I do have. I guarantee that people who are on the negative side of this equation are going to be suffering a whole lot of health problems, because that leads to health problems. And you might be able to band-aid them temporarily, but they're going to come back with a vengeance until we help the person make the shift. And there are two magic reset buttons that help make that shift. One is looking at what you do want instead of what you don't want. So when you find yourself against something, wanting to fight something, whatever, think about, what do I want? Okay, I recognize I don't want that, but what do I want? And as you start focusing on what you do want, start thinking, how can I create that? Or how can I support that? Or how can I help that? That shifts you from negative to positive thinking. The other one is, instead of looking around and I don't have this and I don't have that, blah, blah, take a moment, count your blessings. Look at everything you do have. Be grateful for everything you do have. Be grateful for your life. If you're sick, or you're having problems, still look around at everything that you have that's still good in your life, because I guarantee there's a lot of things that are still good in your life. And if you start focusing on the things that are good in your life, you'll magnify the things that are good in your life and crowd out the things that are negative. I know, I've done it. It works. I've helped clients do it. But it's just the same thing with the disease focus or the health focus. The disease focus, how do I cure this? How do I get rid of this? I don't want to be sick. Diseases are caught. This runs in my family. I'm too busy. Healthy focus is, how do I restore my health? How do I stay healthy? I earned it. I never catch a cold. I earn a cold. I have this thing, I've been saying this for like 35 years, ever since 30 years ago when I started learning this and putting it into practice. I quit talking about catching colds. I earn colds. I earn sickness. I don't catch it. I earn it because of the things I'm doing that are not taking care of my body. But I believe I have the power to overcome my health. And I also believe that when I am sick, that my symptoms are my body trying to heal itself. So I see the symptoms not as disease, but as a sign that there is still health and life and vitality in my body that I can be grateful for, that if I work with it, it can heal. In other words, I, I haven't ever really talked this openly about my viewpoint on illness because I realize it's so different. But then I realized, well, that's the whole point. I've got to share this. I've got to help people understand that when I'm sitting there and my stomach's upset or something, I'm going, well, my body's trying to get rid of this, meal I ate last night that I shouldn't have eaten. So what am I going to learn from this? Am I going to continue to do that and experience upset stomachs, or am I going to do something to change that and alter my diet so that I don't do that to myself again? Build. We all know that nutrition is a really important part of our health. It still just blows me away that the medical community still does not pay much attention to nutrition. Food is still our best medicine, and good food is more important than herbs or supplements in healing. Many, many years ago, and this was again back when I was first getting started in this, I was struggling financially, and I got my wife and I got a little help from our church with food. Unfortunately, like much of the food that people get from today's food banks, that food was less than nutritionally optimal. White flour, refined sugar, canned goods, that kind of stuff. But we were struggling and we needed help, so we accepted it and kind of tried to work our best with it. Um, uh, but but when I finally got a little bit of extra money, the first thing I went to the grocery store and bought fresh produce. And you know what? As soon as I started eating that fresh produce, I noticed something. It wasn't just I physically felt better, it was my mind was clearer. I could think more clearly about how to fix my problems and improve my situation. And that has been a lesson that stuck with me ever since that time. One of my first investments, even when I'm financially struggling, is in the best quality food I can afford, especially vegetables, because I find that vegetables and eating that healthy food not only helps me physically feel better, but it also helps me do better. One of the problems we have, and just to comment, is that big agribusiness is government subsidized. So, and many of those crops are GMO. So what that's done is it's made that the cheapest food is also really the worst food. And organic growers have to pay to be certified. So we are subsidizing politically the production of unhealthy food and taxing the production of healthy food, which is making it increasingly difficult for low-income people to eat. So I tell people, vote with your dollars. Go out and buy the best food you can find, because you're gonna sway the system more by putting your money in good food than you are by trying to change the things politically. And again, briefly, this is not a philosophy. I've seen too many people who adopt some rigid philosophy about their diet, but it's all up in their head, and they're not paying attention to their body. Remember what I said? This is about paying attention to your body. Maybe you are okay being a vegetarian, and maybe you're not. Okay? Maybe you're okay with gluten, and maybe you're not. You have to pay attention to the feedback your body gives you, not some book. Okay? The books are things to point you towards ideas of things you can do, but ultimately you have to learn to pay attention to yourself. You have to learn to engage your senses. You have to look at what smells good. I'm not talking about junk food. I'm talking about natural food, fresh fruits and vegetables, that sort of thing. What smells good, what looks good, what tastes good, eat that. And if you notice that after you eat anything, you get digestive upset, or you feel sleepy, or you get brain fog, or you're irritable, those are not foods that are good for you. Finally, the C, really briefly, is try to get as many toxins out of your life as possible. You know, Actually, interestingly enough, you can switch to a lot of things like using baking soda and vinegar and things to clean your home that are really, really cheap and less expensive than a lot of expensive cleaners. You can basically avoid doing things that are hurting your health. This relates to this whole big picture of environmental health, which is that we're part of the environment. We can't shove all these toxins into our environment and not cause damage to ourselves and our future generations. So this is why I say health to me is this big holistic picture. One of the oldest methods for detoxification, and the simplest one, is fasting, which just periodic fasting, going periodically for 24 to 72 hours on just water, is a tremendous healing thing. I start fasting whenever I feel I'm coming down with a cold, as well as take things to flush my system. If you can't do a complete fast, do a modified fast, like a juice fast, like the lemon and maple syrup master cleanse, or fasting on raw fruit or vegetable juices, or try what I call an elimination fast. I was trying to figure out what I was causing itchy skin and itchy ears, and I happened to notice that it subsided after I hadn't eaten grain for a couple of days, and it picked up when I had a piece of bread. So I fasted from gluten for 2 weeks, and all the itchy skin and itchy ears went away, and I felt better. And then as soon as I ate some grain with gluten in it, the symptoms came back. So by cutting out a particular thing for a period of a week or two, you can determine if you feel better, and when you reintroduce it, it's producing symptoms, you'll notice it pretty quickly, and that way you can eliminate this. So this is another one of the models I use, basically saying we breathe, we eat, we eliminate. That's the basic health. The D part is the most complex part, but it's actually the least important. The ABCs solve 80% of the problems. The other 20% require direct aids, which is supporting weakened body systems and balancing biological terrain with supplements. And I don't have time to get into all that tonight. And then, of course, trauma care. I mean, we do need trauma care. And the best trauma care in the world is modern Western medicals. And sometimes, and I really want to stress this, when a person is really out of balance, they do need drugs, or they may need surgery, or they may need something to help, take care of this catastrophic problem. But then they got to go back and look at what in their life is causing it. So, I had a guy call me. He was scheduled to go in for cancer surgery on his prostate like the next day or the day after that, and wanted to know if I could give him any remedies. And I go, you know what? Treating cancer holistically requires major lifestyle changes and so forth. And if you're to that stage where you're ready for surgery, I said, your best bet might be just to go through the surgery, but realize that just cutting out the cancer doesn't mean you have fixed the metabolic problem that caused you to get cancer in the first place. And so to keep it from coming back, you may want to take a look at your lifestyle. And that's the way I approach that. So to summarize to the end of this, you have two kinds of medicine in TCM. Superior medicine gradually helps the body rebuild health, helps normalize function, isn't toxic, although you can occasionally have adverse reactions to some natural remedies because of your constitution. But once you've rebuilt your health, you may not need to take the supplement or the herb anymore, or whatever. Inferior medicine rapidly relieves symptoms but doesn't restore you to good health. But by rapidly relieving symptoms, it can actually upset the normal body function by forcing an artificial change, and basically uses toxins to do so, or things that have potential for harmful side effects. So you have to continue taking it Uh, and you may even build a tolerance for it and have to switch to something else. But high blood pressure medications, all these medications that relieve symptoms, generally the body builds a tolerance for it, tries to work around the medication, so they have to switch the medication to a new medication that the body hasn't developed tolerance for to try to keep the symptoms managed or suppressed. But again, it's cutting the wires. It's not really fixing the problem. The choice is yours. You know, do you want health care or do you want disease care? We all need disease care sometimes, okay? But what we really want to focus on is figuring out how to take good care of ourselves and build our health. So thank you very much for participating in this webinar this evening, and I hope that you will share this message with others, loved ones, and friends to help get the word out about how we can change the way we're doing things that's really going to restore us to health and not just treat the symptoms. Thank you.